The mining drill stopped. Foreman Kellogg pressed his ear to the metal wall of shaft 7. Nothing. Just the drip of condensation in the darkness below. Then he heard it, a sound like fingernails scraping bone, coming from inside the rock. Impossible, he whispered. The geological surveys showed solid granite for another 1,000 meters. No caverns, no life. The scraping grew louder. Kellogg's breath fogged in the sudden cold. The temperature had dropped 15 degrees in 30 seconds. His hands trembled as he reached for the comm link. Control, this is shaft 7. We've got... The wall exploded, not outward. Inward, something had been digging toward them. Something with claws that could carve through granite like flesh. Kellogg stumbled backward, his helmet light cutting through the dust and debris. In the jagged hole, something moved. Purple flesh glistened. 4 arms unfolded like a nightmare spider. But it was the eyes that froze his blood. Human eyes. Intelligent, hungry, and utterly alien. The creature's mouth opened, revealing rows of needle teeth. When it spoke, the voice was a corruption of human speech, like words filtered through acid and madness. We have been waiting. Kellogg ran. Behind him, more walls began to crack. The scraping sound multiplied. Dozens of claws. Hundreds. They had been there all along. Beneath Tyraxis Prime's richest mining colony. Beneath 10,000 unsuspecting souls. Waiting. The first Genestealer cult had taken root 3 generations ago. A single spore, smaller than dust, had drifted down from the void. It found a host, then another, then another. Now they were ready. Kellogg's screams echoed through the mining tunnels as purple shadows poured from every crack in the walls. The colony's lights flickered and died, one by one. In the darkness, the real horror began. Not the killing. That would come later. The kissing. Genestealers didn't just murder their victims. They blessed them. Their ovipositor tongues carried a gift more terrible than death, the gift of transformation. Kellogg felt the needle pierce his neck, felt the alien genetic material flood his bloodstream, felt his thoughts changing. His last human thought was a prayer. His first hybrid thought was gratitude. But what happened to Tyraxis Prime was just the beginning of a curse that had been spreading through the galaxy for 10,000 years. A curse that turned love into horror, family into weapon, and hope into the cruelest lie of all. In the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, there is only war. But some horrors transcend even that endless carnage. Deep in the void between stars, something stirs. Something that was never meant to exist. The Genestealers, living nightmares born from the twisted union of alien hunger and human flesh. They are not conquerors. They are not invaders. They are corruption itself, walking on 2 legs. For 10,000 years, these creatures have haunted the Imperium of man. They slip through shadows in the bellies of space hulks. They crawl through ventilation shafts on mining worlds. They smile with human faces while alien thoughts writhe behind familiar eyes. Every Genestealer was once something else. A miner on a distant world. A ship's engineer floating through the dark. A mother tucking her children into bed. The transformation begins with a single scratch, a moment of contact. Flesh meeting alien claw in the suffocating darkness of forgotten corridors. What follows is not death. Death would be mercy. What follows is rebirth into something that remembers being human, but can never be human again. These are not mindless beasts. They think. They plan. They love their hybrid children with a devotion that would move saints to tears. if those children weren't abominations that feast on human suffering. They build families. They form communities. They worship together in basement chapels, praising the star gods that whisper promises of unity through their alien blood. And all the while, they spread. One scratch becomes two. Two becomes four. Four becomes a cult. A cult becomes a rebellion. A rebellion becomes a world screaming as the sky tears open and the tyrannid hive fleets answer their children's call. This is their story, the cursed existence of creatures caught between two natures, human enough to suffer, alien enough to damn entire worlds. They are the bridge between species, the living proof that some boundaries should never be crossed. They are the price of humanity's expansion into the dark. But the real horror isn't what they've become. The real horror is what they remember. The mining station Epsilon 7 had been silent for 3 days. Commander Thane's boots echoed through corridors that should have buzzed with activity. The air tasted of copper and something else, something organic that made his throat burn. He found the first body in the mess hall. Miner Korvac sat slumped over his meal, fork still gripped in fingers that had grown too long. Purple veins spider-webbed across his neck like infected lightning. His eyes, once brown, now gleamed with an alien intelligence that tracked Thane's movement. "Emperor preserve us," Thane whispered. Korvac's mouth opened. No words came out, only a wet, chittering sound that seemed to echo from deep within his chest. The Genestealer curse had found its first victim, but this wasn't death. This was transformation. The alien parasite had rewritten Korvac's very DNA, cell by cell, thought by thought. His human memories remained, twisted into something that served the hive mind's hunger. Thane backed away, Voxcaster trembling in his grip. "Base, this is Epsilon 7. We have a situation." Static answered him. Then he heard the singing. It drifted from the lower levels. Dozens of voices joined in harmony that no human throat should produce. The melody was beautiful and wrong, like a lullaby sung by predators. Thane descended into the mining tunnels, following that hypnotic sound. The walls here pulsed with a bioluminescent slime that painted everything in sickly purple light. The temperature dropped with each step, but sweat still beaded on his forehead. The singing grew louder. In the deepest chamber, he found them. 43 miners stood in perfect circles, their mutations more advanced than Korvac's. Some sprouted chitinous plates along their spines. Others had developed secondary arms that ended in razor-sharp claws. At their center sat something that had once been Chief Engineer Valdris. Now she was beautiful in the way a spider is beautiful, elegant, purposeful, deadly. Her skull had elongated, her skin turned pale as moonlight. When she smiled, Thane saw rows of needle-sharp teeth. "Welcome, Commander," she said, her voice a harmony of human and alien tones. "We've been waiting for you." The infected miners turned as one, their alien eyes reflecting that purple glow. Thane's finger found his bolt pistol's trigger. One shot. That's all he'd need for himself. But then Valdris spoke again, and her words froze his blood. "Your wife sends her regards. Sarah was so beautiful when the kiss took her." Thane's weapon clattered to the ground, but the real horror hadn't even begun. The infected miner's eyes had lost their humanity 3 days ago. Beneath Tertius Prime's industrial sprawl, in tunnels that reeked of promethium and decay, something ancient stirred. The Genestealer patriarch's psychic tendrils reached through flesh and bone, binding its children to a hunger that transcended individual will. Foreman Kask, watched his crew with growing unease. Their movements had become synchronized, unnaturally precise. The curse of the Genestealer wasn't just physical transformation. It was the slow death of the self. Each infected soul became a puppet, dancing to the hive mind's silent symphony. Their thoughts, once their own, now belonged to something vast and alien. In the deepest shaft, Worker 7739 felt the change accelerating. His spine elongated with wet, grinding sounds. Bone cracked and reformed. The pain should have been unbearable, but the Patriarch's presence wrapped around his mind like a narcotic embrace. "Soon," whispered the voice that wasn't his own. "Soon you will be perfect." The transformation wasn't random. It was orchestrated. The hive mind selected its servants with calculated precision. The strong became pure-strain killers. The clever became Magus leaders. The broken became willing sacrifices. Above ground, Planetary Governor Vex received reports of missing workers. 1,200 souls vanished in the past month. The numbers meant nothing to him, just statistics on a data slate. He couldn't comprehend that each missing person represented another node in an expanding web of psychic slavery. The infected felt no loyalty to their former lives. Wives became strangers. Children became obstacles. The Patriarch's will overwrote every human bond, replacing love with purpose, fear with certainty. In the nursery chambers, hybrid children played games that would horrify their grandparents. They practiced hunting techniques with dolls. They whispered prayers to the star gods in languages that predated human speech. The curse wasn't just individual. It was generational. Each new birth carried the taint deeper into human society. The infection spread through bloodlines like a slow-burning fire, consuming entire family trees from within. Kask descended into Shaft 7, his last rifle trembling in sweaty palms. The silence felt wrong. No drilling sounds, no worker chatter. Just the distant drip of moisture and something else. A rhythmic scratching against stone. He found them gathered in the main chamber. 43 workers standing in perfect formation, their backs to him. Their breathing synchronized, their heads tilted at identical angles. When they turned, Kask saw the truth written in their transformed faces. The curse had claimed them completely. They were no longer human. They were extensions of something vast and hungry. But the real horror wasn't their monstrous appearance. It was the serene happiness in their alien eyes. The Patriarch crouches in absolute darkness, its forearms trembling against cold stone. Thousands of years of consciousness. Thousands of years of hunger that never dies. Its massive skull throbs with psychic weight, every cult member's thoughts bleeding into its mind like acid. The baker's morning prayers, the governor's secret fears, the child's first whispered devotion, all of it flowing through neural pathways that were never meant to carry such load. The creature that was once a simple Genestealer remembers fragments. The clean simplicity of hunt and kill. The pure satisfaction of implanting genes and moving on. Now it sits trapped in this cathedral of bone and flesh, watching its children worship what it has become. The Patriarch's third eye weeps constantly, a biological response to psychic overload that its creators never anticipated. The tears burn tracks down its purple-black carapace, leaving permanent scars. It feels every cult member die. Every Imperial raid that tears through the underhive sends shockwaves of agony through its expanded consciousness. When arbitrators execute its hybrid children, the Patriarch experiences each last bolt impact, each broken bone, each final breath. The worst part isn't the pain. It's the knowledge that this cycle will repeat forever. The tyrannid hive mind designed the perfect trap. Consciousness expanded just enough to understand suffering, but not enough to escape it. The patriarch remembers the moment transformation began, how its simple Genestealer brain started growing new neural clusters, how thoughts became complex, then tormented, how hunger evolved from instinct into existential dread. It watches new generations of hybrids born into this cursed existence, sees their human emotions warring with alien instincts, feels their confusion and pain amplified through the psychic network. Every blessing it grants is a chain. Every miracle performed deepens the trap. The cult grows stronger, but so does the patriarch's burden. More minds to carry, more suffering to absorb, more consciousness pressing against the edges of sanity. Sometimes it dreams of the hive fleet's arrival, of dissolution back into the greater swarm, of blessed unconsciousness. But even that hope carries horror, because the patriarch knows what happens when the fleet arrives. How its children, these devoted, loving, human children, will be consumed. How their final moments of betrayal and terror will echo through its mind as the hive mind reclaims everything. The creature raises its massive head, sensing movement in the cathedral above. New supplicants approach, more souls to bind to this endless cycle. But tonight, something feels different about their footsteps. They called themselves human. But Marcus Valdez knew better as he watched his daughter sleep. Her skin held that subtle purple tinge, her fingers just a fraction too long. The telltale signs were there, growing stronger with each passing day. The first-generation hybrids looked almost normal. Almost. They walked among Imperial citizens, undetected, shopkeepers, teachers, soldiers, each one carrying the Genestealer curse in their blood, passed down from parents who had been kissed by alien claws in the darkness. Marcus touched the scar on his neck. 3 parallel lines where the pure strain had marked him 5 years ago. He remembered the overwhelming love that flooded his mind afterward, the desperate need to protect the beautiful creature that had chosen him. Now he understood it was poison. His daughter stirred, and when she opened her eyes, they held that familiar violet shimmer. She smiled at him with genuine affection, unaware of the horror growing in her cells. "Papa, I had the dream again," she whispered. "The Star Children are coming home." The second generation was worse, more alien features. Elongated skulls, extra limbs hidden beneath loose clothing. They gathered in basements and abandoned warehouses, their psychic whispers calling to something in the void. Marcus had attended their meetings. The cult called it worship, but he felt the wrongness in his bones. The way they moved together, synchronized. The way they spoke of the great devourer with religious ecstasy. By the third generation, humanity was barely a memory. These creatures crawled on 4 limbs, their faces stretched into alien mockeries. They birthed pure Genestealers now, the cycle complete. The infection had consumed entire bloodlines, turning families into something that would feast on their former neighbors. Marcus watched his daughter's sleeping face, seeing glimpses of the monster she would become. The Imperial Guard would come eventually. They always did when the infestation grew too large. He reached for the last pistol hidden beneath his pillow. The metal felt cold against his palm. One shot would end her suffering before it truly began, before she became something that would hunt other children, spreading the curse further. But as his finger found the trigger, she opened those violet eyes again. "I love you, Papa," she whispered, and despite everything, despite knowing what she was becoming, Marcus felt that alien love surge through his corrupted mind once more. The gun trembled in his hand, but the real horror hadn't even begun. The Magus stood in the cathedral's shadow, watching his children prepare. 3 generations had passed since the first kiss. 3 generations of careful cultivation, patient infection, deliberate love. Now came the harvest. Across Tertius Prime, hybrid families gathered in basement shrines. The smell of incense mixed with something else, something organic, pulsing, alive. Candles flickered against walls lined with chitin and flesh. The children sang lullabies their human grandparents would never recognize. Commander Vex received the transmission at 0347 hours. Static crackled through the Vox, then silence, then screaming. Tertius Prime has gone dark, his aide whispered. Vex knew that sound. He'd heard it before on Caliban 7th, on Mordian Secundus, on 17 other worlds that no longer existed on Imperial star charts. The curse had claimed another, but this wasn't random destruction. This was orchestration. The Patriarch's psychic call reached across the void, touching minds light years away. On mining stations and agri-worlds, in noble houses and factory districts, infected bloodlines felt the summons, time to rise. The beauty of the curse wasn't its speed, it was its patience. Humans called it infection. The Genestealers knew better. This was evolution. On Tertius Prime, Governor Malthorn signed his final decree with hands that trembled, not from fear, from anticipation. His great-grandfather had been kissed by something beautiful in the deep mines. Now the family debt was due. Planetary defense forces turned their weapons inward, not in rebellion, in celebration. The sky cracked open like an egg. Tyrannid bioships descended through atmosphere thick with spores and screaming. But they weren't invaders. They were coming home. Vex watched the orbital feeds until static consumed them. 17 worlds. Now 18, each one following the same pattern. First came the miners, the outcasts, the forgotten. Then the merchants, the administrators, the faithful. Finally the nobles, the governors, the supposedly pure. All of them singing the same song. All of them welcoming their children home. The curse didn't spread randomly across the galaxy. It chose. It planned. It remembered every slight, every purge, every attempt to burn it from existence. And somewhere in the dark between stars, ancient minds counted the fallen worlds like prayer beads. 18 down. 1,000,000 more to go. Vex closed the tactical display and reached for his sidearm. Because he'd just remembered something. His own grandfather had been a miner. But the real horror wasn't what the curse had already taken. It was realizing how long it had been watching you. The Magos biologist stared at the dissection table, his mechadendrites trembling. After 3 centuries of study, the truth carved itself into his augmented mind like acid through ceramite. Genestealers weren't predators. They were prisoners. The chitinous carapace split under his molecular scalpel, revealing neural pathways that pulsed with alien purpose. Each synapse fired in perfect synchronization, not with the creature's own will, but with something vast and hungry, light years away, Emperor's blood. He whispered through Vox grills. They're slaves. The hive mind's tendrils reached across the void, invisible chains binding every Genestealer to a singular, ravenous consciousness. What humanity feared as apex predators were merely extensions of something infinitely worse. Synaptic fluid dripped from his instruments, carrying the bitter tang of evolutionary betrayal. Every kiss, every infection, every cult uprising, none of it was choice. The Genestealers moved like marionettes. their strings pulled by a cosmic puppeteer that viewed entire species as nothing more than biomass to be harvested. The Magos traced neural pathways that writhed even in death, following connections that led to horror beyond comprehension. These creatures felt pain, experienced fear, understood their own damnation, yet remained powerless to resist. They were conscious of their slavery. Worlds burned because the hive mind willed it. Families died because distant synapses demanded flesh. Entire civilizations fell to orchestrated madness, conducted by a consciousness that spanned galaxies. The temperature in the laboratorium dropped as realization crystallized. Genestealers weren't evil. They were victims of the greatest evil the universe had ever spawned. Each cult patriarch, writhing in psychic agony as the hive fleet approached, knew exactly what was coming. They felt the betrayal burning through every nerve as their children were consumed alongside their prey. The Tyranids had weaponized suffering itself. Every Genestealer carried the knowledge of their ultimate fate, to be devoured by the very force they served. They infected worlds not from malice, but from biological compulsion so absolute it made damnation seem merciful. The Magos' optical sensors focused on a single, perfect detail. A neural cluster that pulsed with what could only be described as despair. These creatures mourned their own existence. They wept tears of acid for the lives they destroyed, knowing they would never be free, never be forgiven, never escape the hunger that drove them forward like a plague of conscious nightmares. The Vox system crackled with incoming transmissions, distress signals from 3 sectors, Genestealer cults, rising simultaneously. The Magos looked at his data slate, then at the corpse before him. But the real horror hadn't even begun. The patriarch sits motionless on his throne of bone and flesh. His forearms hang limp, claws that once tore through imperial steel now trembling with exhaustion. The creature that commands thousands feels the weight of absolute slavery pressing down on his chitinous skull. For he is not truly free. Never has been. The hive mind's voice echoes through dimensions. A psychic scream that burns through his consciousness like acid through ceramite. Every thought belongs to the swarm. Every decision flows from the great devourer's endless hunger. The patriarch remembers, fragments of memory from before the infection took hold. A different life, a different purpose. But those thoughts are poison now, crushed beneath the weight of genetic imperatives. His children gather around him, hundreds of hybrids born from his seed. They worship him as a god, their purple eyes gleaming with devotion. They cannot see the truth that gnaws at his alien heart. He is their slave as much as they are his. The cult spreads through the underhive like a cancer, converting the desperate and forgotten. Each new member brings the planet closer to consumption. The patriarch watches his followers prepare for the day of ascension, knowing it will be their doom. The irony tastes like copper and despair. He guides them toward salvation that is actually annihilation. He promises transcendence while delivering them to the feeding tentacles of bioships. Every prayer they offer to him is another link in their chains. The psychic beacon grows stronger with each passing day. Soon, the hive fleet will arrive. The sky will darken with living ships that blot out the stars. His children will dance in the streets, celebrating their liberation. And then they will scream. The patriarch feels the hive mind's pleasure at this thought, a cold satisfaction that makes his alien flesh crawl. He tries to resist, to warn his followers, but his vocal cords betray him. Only words of worship emerge. The curse runs deeper than flesh and bone. It lives in every strand of DNA, every synaptic connection. The Genestealer species exists in a state of perpetual contradiction. Apex predators who are themselves prey. Leaders who cannot lead. Fathers who devour their children. The patriarch closes his 4 eyes and feels the weight of 10,000 years of servitude. But in the darkness behind his eyelids, something stirs. A memory not his own. A whisper of rebellion that shouldn't exist. Somewhere in the galaxy, another patriarch has done the impossible. But the real horror hadn't even begun. The patriarch feels it first, a tremor in the warp. A whisper that makes his alien heart race with something between ecstasy and terror. His children sense his excitement through the psychic bond that binds them. The fleet has come. Across the Hive City, 4th-generation hybrids pause in their daily routines. Factory workers drop their tools. Administrators stop mid-sentence. The call echoes through every corrupted mind. Come home. But home isn't what they expected. The Tyranid bioships descend like living mountains. Their shadows fall across the world the Genestealers spent decades preparing. Every human they infected, every child born with alien genes, every carefully placed cultist in positions of power. All of it was bait. The patriarch realizes the truth as the first spores begin to fall. His children weren't building a new world. They were tenderizing meat. Every hybrid he lovingly created, every pure-strain Genestealer that carried his genetic legacy, they're nothing more than seasoning for the feast. The hybrids scream as bioacid rain begins to fall. Their human skin blisters and peels away. The alien genes that made them outcasts among humanity now mark them for consumption. They run through burning streets, calling out to their patriarch for salvation that will never come. He cannot save them. He was never meant to. The great devourer doesn't distinguish between predator and prey. It consumes everything. The Genestealers who thought themselves apex hunters discover they're just another link in an endless food chain. The patriarch watches his empire crumble in hours. Centuries of patient infiltration. Generations of hybrid children raised in shadow. All devoured by the very force that created his kind. The bitter irony tastes like copper and ash. Some hybrids turn their weapons on the descending swarms. Others prostrate themselves before their devourers, begging for mercy in languages both human and alien. The Tyranids show no preference. Teeth and claws find flesh, regardless of loyalty. The patriarch's psychic scream echoes across the dying world. It's a sound of pure betrayal. The rage of a father watching his children consumed. The fury of a god discovering he was always just a tool. As the bioships begin their harvest, something else stirs in the darkness. Something that has been watching, waiting, learning from this cycle of corruption and consumption. But what lurks in the shadows of this feast makes even the great devourer pause. In the sterile observation chamber of Hive Fleet Kraken's bioship, Megas Kethvar stared at his own reflection in the polished metal wall. His 4 arms moved in perfect synchronization. His elongated skull pulsed with alien thoughts. The ridge of bone where his nose once sat reminded him of what he had been. Human. The irony cut deeper than any blade. Genestealers were not born monsters. They were made. Every hybrid, every infected soul, every twisted patriarch had once drawn breath as humanity did. We are what you fear to become, Kethvar whispered to his reflection. The smell of recycled air mixed with something organic, something wrong. Around him, his brood siblings moved through their daily rituals. Each one bore the mark of their former species. There was Sister Vex, whose Imperial Guard uniform still hung in tatters from her changing form. Her memories of defending Cadia burned bright, even as her new instincts screamed for the planet's destruction. Brother Thane retained his merchant's calculating mind, now turned toward spreading the cult's influence through trade routes. His human cunning served the hive mind perfectly. The Yapper temperature dropped as Kethavar approached the nursery chambers. Hundreds of first-generation hybrids writhed in their biopods. Their cries sounded almost human, almost. "Look at what we've become," he said to Vex, his voice carrying both pride and revulsion. Perfect predators wearing the faces of our prey. Vex's remaining human eye flickered with something that might have been regret. "We remember love. We remember hope. But we can only feel hunger now." The cruel mathematics were undeniable. Every Genestealer cult began with a single organism infecting a human host. That host retained their memories, their relationships, their capacity for emotion. But their loyalty belonged to something vast and alien. They became living weapons disguised as neighbors, friends, lovers. Kethavar touched the wall again, his clawed fingers tracing patterns only he could see. In the reflection, he saw not a monster, but a tragedy. Humanity's greatest weakness, their capacity for trust, for connection, had become their downfall. The Genestealers were evolution's cruelest joke. They took everything beautiful about human nature and weaponized it. Parental love became the drive to infect children. Community bonds became cult networks. Faith became fanatical devotion to the star gods. A tremor ran through the ship. The hive mind stirred, sending new instructions through the synaptic web. Kethavar smiled with too many teeth. Somewhere in the galaxy, another world was about to discover what humanity looked like when stripped of its illusions. But first, they had to deal with the message that just arrived from Terra. The metallic taste of desperation clings to every breath aboard the mining vessel. Meridian's Edge. Captain Voss thought they'd escaped. 3 months since the last infection. 3 months of clean air and dreamless sleep. He was wrong. The first sign isn't screaming. It's silence. The kind that makes your skin crawl and your heart forget its rhythm. Miner Kellogg hasn't reported for shift rotation in 18 hours. His quarters reek of something sweet and rotten, like fruit left to decay in summer heat. Voss's hand trembles as he keys the door override. The metal groans like a dying animal. Inside, Kellogg sits perfectly still. His back faces the door, shoulders unnaturally rigid. The temperature drops 10 degrees. Frost forms on the captain's breath. "Kellogg?" No response. Just that terrible, perfect stillness. Voss steps closer. The floor beneath his boots feels sticky. Dark stains spread across the deck plating like spilled ink. Then Kellogg turns, his face. God Emperor preserve us, his face. The skin has taken on that familiar purple hue. Veins bulge beneath the surface like writhing worms. But his eyes burn with an intelligence that isn't human anymore. "Captain," Kellogg whispers, voice like grinding glass. "I've been waiting." Voss reaches for his last pistol. His fingers won't obey. They shake like autumn leaves in a hurricane, because behind Kellogg, in the shadows of his quarters, movement stirs. Not one figure. Dozens. The entire mining crew stands in perfect formation. Each face bears the same purple taint. Each pair of eyes holds that same alien hunger. They've been infected for weeks, months perhaps, playing their roles, waiting. The Genestealer curse doesn't just corrupt flesh, it corrupts time itself. past, present, and future blur into one endless moment of hunger. You see, Captain, Kellogg continues, rising with inhuman grace. There is no escape. There never was. The infected crew steps forward as one, their movements synchronized like a grotesque ballet. The Patriarch showed us truth. We are not victims. We are chosen. Voss finally draws his weapon. The barrel wavers in his grip. 47 souls aboard this vessel. How many remain human? How many ever were? The ship's lights flicker. In the strobing darkness, he sees them clearly, every face. Every crew member he's known for years, all wearing that same purple smile. Welcome to the family, Captain. But as Kellogg speaks, Voss notices something that makes his blood freeze completely. The reflection in the mirror behind them shows only empty space. The infected cast no reflection at all. The ancient patriarch crouches in the cathedral's depths, his 4 arms trembling with more than age. Purple veins pulse beneath translucent flesh as psychic screams echo through his skull. Every birth brings agony. Each new hybrid tears at his consciousness like broken glass. The patriarch feels their first breath, their confusion, their hunger. He experiences every moment of their cursed existence through the synaptic web that binds his bloodline. I am their father. He whispers to the darkness. I am their prison. The irony cuts deeper than any blade. Created to be the ultimate predator, the patriarch has become the ultimate victim. His children worship him as a god while he suffers for their sins. Memories flood his ancient mind. The first world he infected, millennia ago. The joy he felt watching his cult spread like wildfire through the population. Now that joy has curdled into endless torment. Every hybrid that dies screams through his nervous system. Every act of violence they commit burns through his psyche. The patriarch experiences 10,000 deaths simultaneously, feels every betrayal his children inflict upon their human families. The cathedral walls weep condensation that tastes of copper and despair. His massive claws scrape against stone as another wave of psychic feedback crashes over him. Somewhere above, his newest children are feeding. He feels their teeth pierce flesh, tastes the metallic warmth of blood that isn't his own. Stop, he begs the empty air. But the hive mind's commands flow through him like poison in his veins. Reproduce, spread, consume. The directives override his pleas, forcing his body to continue the cycle. The patriarch's greatest weapon has become his cruelest curse. His psychic dominance, designed to control lesser minds, now makes him a conductor of suffering. Every emotion his children feel amplifies through his consciousness. Their hunger becomes his starvation. Their rage becomes his fury. He remembers the human he once was, before the kiss that changed everything. That man died screaming, but at least his torment ended quickly. The patriarch's suffering is eternal. Fresh psychic static erupts as his latest brood discovers their true nature. He feels their horror at seeing their own reflection, their revulsion at what they've become. Forgive me, the patriarch whispers to children who will never hear him. But in the shadows beyond his throne, something stirs, a presence that shouldn't exist in this sacred space. The patriarch's 6 eyes widen in recognition and terror. Someone has been watching. Someone has been listening. But who could penetrate the cult's defenses undetected? The nursery should have been filled with laughter. Instead, Administrator Vex stood frozen in the doorway, watching 17 children play with toys that moved on their own. The metallic scent of spilled promethium mixed with something sweeter. Something wrong. Daddy, look what I made. whispered 6-year-old Kira, her voice carrying harmonics that human vocal cords couldn't produce. The toy in her hands writhed. Chitinous segments clicked together, forming patterns that hurt to perceive. Purple veins pulsed beneath translucent skin as the thing took shape. Vex's hands trembled against the cold metal door for aim. These weren't his children anymore. The Genestealer infection had claimed them 3 weeks ago, but the transformation was accelerating beyond all projections. "We're making friends for the big ships." Another child giggled, her teeth now rows of needle-sharp points. "The hungry ships that sing in our dreams." The temperature dropped as 17 pairs of eyes turned toward him. Some still held traces of human iris patterns. Others had become solid black orbs that reflected the emergency lighting like oil. Vex remembered Kira's first steps, her mother's smile. The birthday party where she'd blown out 4 candles with such joy. Now she tilted her head at an impossible angle, studying him with predatory patience. "The patriarch says you're scared, Daddy." Her voice layered with subsonic frequencies that made his bones ache. "But you don't need to be scared. We're still your children." The other younglings moved closer, their movements too fluid, too coordinated. Like a single organism wearing 17 different faces. Vex's finger hovered over the emergency purge button. One press would flood the chamber with cleansing flame. One press would end their suffering. But they were still looking at him with love. Corrupted, alien love that wanted to drag him into their collective embrace. To make him part of the great devouring that approached from beyond the stars. "We can make you better too," Kira whispered, extending arms that had grown too long, fingers that ended in chitinous claws. "We can make everyone better." The toys around them began to move faster, clicking and chittering in rhythms that matched the children's heartbeats, or what had once been heartbeats. Vex closed his eyes, tried to remember the sound of normal laughter. When he opened them again, all 17 children were smiling. But behind them, something much larger was stirring in the shadows. The Genestealer crouched in the darkness of the Manufactorum's lower levels. Its claws scraped against rusted metal as it breathed in the scent of human sweat and fear drifting down from above. This was not choice. This was compulsion. Every fiber of its being screamed for the kiss. The genetic imperative burned through its nervous system like acid through flesh. It had tried to resist once, in those first moments after awakening. The pain had been exquisite. Now it understood the true curse of its existence. Above, footsteps echoed through the corridors. Night shift workers, unaware that death stalked beneath their feet. The creature's elongated skull tilted upward, tracking their movement through the vibrations in the metal. It remembered being human. The memory was a knife that twisted deeper with each passing hour. Johannes Vex had been a good man, a loyal Imperial citizen who said his prayers and loved his family. He had died the moment those claws pierced his skull and deposited their terrible gift. What remained was something wearing his face. The hunger gnawed at its consciousness like a living thing. Not hunger for food, hunger for purpose, for the spreading of the gift, for the creation of more like itself. It thought of its daughter, sleeping peacefully in Hab Block 7. Sweet little Anna with her bright eyes and innocent smile. The creature's hands trembled as it imagined those same eyes glazed with alien devotion. This was the deepest cruelty of the Genestealer curse. They retained enough humanity to understand what they had lost, enough memory to feel the weight of what they were about to do. The perfect predator was not one that felt nothing. It was one that felt everything and acted anyway. The footsteps grew closer. The creature pressed itself against the wall, feeling the cold metal against its chitinous hide. Its forearms flexed in anticipation. The kiss would be swift. The transformation would take weeks. By then, there would be no Johannes Vex left to mourn what he had become. It thought of Anna one last time, her laughter echoing through their small hab unit, the way she would run to greet him after each shift, arms outstretched. Soon, those same arms would embrace others. The footsteps stopped directly overhead, the creature's lips pulled back in something that might have once been a smile. The endless hunger demanded satisfaction, and in the grim darkness of the far future, hunger always won. But what the creature didn't know was that Anna had already begun to change. The irony burns like acid through chitin and bone. Genestealers believe they serve a higher purpose. They whisper prayers to the star gods in languages that predate human civilization. Their infected minds pulse with religious fervor, convinced they're chosen vessels for divine transformation. But they're not servants. They're cattle. The tyrannid hive mind views Genestealers as disposable tools, biological can openers designed to crack planetary defenses from within. No different from the mindless hormagaunts that charge Imperial gun lines, or the Ripper swarms that strip worlds to bone. The bitter truth festers in their genetic code. Every Genestealer patriarch that establishes a cult believes it's founding a dynasty. It feels the weight of destiny in its 6 arms, tastes victory in the pheromone trails of its offspring. The patriarch dreams of the day its children will inherit the stars. Instead, it's signing their death warrant. When the tyrannid fleet finally arrives, drawn by the psychic beacon the cult has so faithfully maintained, the slaughter begins immediately. The same hive ships that the Genestealers worshipped as divine vessels turn their bioweapons on the very cultists who summon them. The screams carry a particular quality: betrayal mixed with confusion. Human cultists die first, their weak flesh providing easy biomass for the digestion pools. They cry out to their hybrid children for salvation that will never come. The pure-strain Genestealers last longer, their enhanced reflexes allowing them precious seconds to comprehend their fate. They're being harvested. The hive mind strips away their memories, their personalities, their desperate faith. Everything that made them individuals dissolves into the collective consciousness like sugar in acid rain. Their bodies are broken down into component proteins, their genetic material cataloged and filed away for future use. Some patriarchs live long enough to feel their psychic connection to the hive mind shift from communion to consumption. In those final moments, they understand the cosmic joke. They were never the chosen ones. They were the bait. The tyrannids have played this game across 1,000 worlds, leaving behind empty husks where thriving civilizations once stood. Each Genestealer cult believes it's unique, special, beloved by their alien gods. But in the digestion pools of the hive ships, all flesh tastes the same. The great devourer moves on, leaving nothing but silence and the fading echoes of broken prayers. Somewhere in the void, new spores drift toward unsuspecting worlds, carrying fresh Genestealer organisms ready to begin the cycle again. But this time, something different stirred in the darkness between stars. The ancient patriarch crouched in the cathedral's shadow, its forearms trembling against cold stone. Steam rose from its chitinous hide as acidic tears carved channels down its alien face. For 3 centuries, it had ruled this world, built a cult, bred an army. Now it felt the great devourer's hunger pulling at its mind like hooks in flesh. The patriarch's psychic scream echoed through the hive city's depths, Every hybrid child felt their father's anguish, a telepathic wail that shattered windows and drove lesser minds to madness. It remembered being pure, a simple creature with simple purpose: infiltrate, corrupt, consume. The blessing and curse of tyrannid evolution had changed everything. Intelligence was agony. The patriarch understood what its children could not. When the hive fleet arrived, there would be no paradise, no ascension, only biomass to be harvested. Its cultists prayed in the tunnels below, their hybrid features grotesque in candlelight. They sang hymns of the coming salvation, voices cracking with religious fervor. Fools. Beautiful, necessary fools. The patriarch's massive claws scraped against the cathedral floor. It could taste copper in the air, the blood of 1,000 sacrifices offered in its name. The metallic tang mixed with incense and decay. Every day, the psychic beacon grew stronger. The fleet drew closer. The patriarch felt its alien brothers calling across the void, their hunger an endless symphony of consumption. But here, in this stolen sanctuary, surrounded by its twisted children, something else stirred. Love. The word was poison in its mind, an infection worse than any virus. The patriarch had watched generations of hybrids grow, fight, die for their cause. It had held their broken bodies, felt their dreams through the psychic link. They were more than tools now. They were family. The approaching fleet would devour them all. The great devourer showed no mercy to its own servants. The patriarch knew this truth with crystalline clarity. Its children did not. Outside, thunder rolled across the hive city. But this was no storm. The sound of descending spores filled the night sky. Massive shadows blotted out the stars as bioships entered the atmosphere. The patriarch rose to its full height, towering over the altar, its 4 arms spread wide in a gesture of terrible acceptance. The time had come to choose between duty and love. But as the first tyrannid warriors crashed through the cathedral's stained glass windows, the patriarch realized something that chilled its alien soul. The choice had already been made for them. The Genestealer felt it first as a whisper, not sound, not thought. Something deeper, a pull in its very DNA, threading through synapses that shouldn't exist. The creature's elongated skull tilted, 6 arms trembling as the connection solidified across impossible distances. The hive mind had found it. Brother Captain Thaddeus watched through his scope as the alien's behavior shifted. One moment it stalked the underhive shadows like a predator. The next it stood perfectly still, head raised toward stars it couldn't see. Something's wrong, he whispered into his vox. The Genestealer's third eye opened. Not the physical organ. Something worse. A psychic aperture that connected directly to the great devourer's consciousness. Through this window poured the hunger of 1 trillion tyrannids, the collective will of bioships that had consumed entire star systems. The creature's claws scraped against rusted metal as visions flooded its mind. Flesh factories, digestion pools, worlds stripped to bedrock. But beneath the hunger lay something unexpected: loneliness. The Genestealer had spent decades in isolation, cut off from its kind. Now, reconnected to the hive mind's vast network, it experienced the crushing weight of cosmic solitude. It was one voice among billions, yet utterly alone. Thaddeus adjusted his targeting reticle, finger hovering over the trigger. Through his enhanced optics, he watched the alien's body language change. The predatory grace remained, but something else emerged, a terrible sadness that seemed almost human. "Emperor preserve us," he breathed. The Genestealer turned toward his position, not because it heard him, because the hive mind had tasted his thoughts through the psychic connection, sampling the fierce sweat on his skin, the elevated heartbeat, the chemical signature of adrenaline flooding his system. Through the creature's senses, a trillion alien minds now knew exactly where he hid. The Genestealer's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter, or hunger, or both. It began to move, but not toward Thaddeus. Instead, it descended deeper into the underhive, following corridors that led to the civilian sectors. The hive mind had shown it something beautiful, a vision of perfect unity achieved through infection and transformation. Thousands of humans lived below, unaware that salvation approached on 6 clawed limbs. Thaddeus lowered his rifle, understanding flooding through him like ice water. The Genestealer wasn't hunting anymore. It was recruiting. And somewhere in the darkness, children were playing games they would never finish. In the underhive of Tertius Prime, 17-year-old Kara pressed her palm against the cold metal wall. Her fingers trembled, not from fear, from the alien thoughts crawling through her mind like hungry insects. She was 3rd generation, born human, raised human. But the Genestealer curse flowed in her blood like poison mixed with honey. The other children huddled in the shadows nearby. Marcus, barely 14, scratched at the purple marks spreading across his neck. Little Anna whimpered in the corner, her eyes already beginning to cloud with that terrible, beautiful darkness. They were caught between 2 worlds. Too human for the Patriarch's inner circle. Too alien for the surface dwellers who would burn them alive if they knew. The dreams came again last night, Marcus whispered. His voice cracked with puberty and something far worse. Kara nodded. She knew those dreams. Visions of vast hive ships drifting through the void. The sweet song of the star gods calling them home to a place they'd never seen. But when she woke, she still loved her human mother. Still remembered birthday cakes and lullabies. The hybrid children lived in constant agony. Their human hearts broke for families who would reject them. Their alien minds screamed for unity they could never fully achieve. Anna began to change that day. Her spine elongated with wet, crackling sounds. Her screams echoed through the tunnels as bone and flesh reshaped itself. The others watched in horrified fascination. This was their future. This beautiful, terrible transformation that would steal away everything they'd ever been. Kara held Anna's hand as the girl's fingers grew claws, as her teeth sharpened into fangs, as her eyes became black pools of starlight. I can still remember Mama's face. Anna gasped between waves of agony. But it's getting harder to care. The worst part wasn't the physical pain. It was watching their humanity slip away like sand through desperate fingers. They were children of 2 curses, forever trapped between love and hunger, between memory and instinct. In the darkness, Kara felt her own spine begin to itch. How long before she stopped caring too? The voxcasters across Hive City Tertius crackled with static. Then silence. Broodlord Zerath felt it first. A tremor in the psychic web that connected every Genestealer across the world. The star gods had returned. After generations of patient infiltration, after decades of corruption spreading through bloodlines like poison through water, the Hive fleet had finally arrived. But this wasn't salvation. This was judgment. The sky above the industrial sprawl turned black with bioships. Massive shadow creatures blotted out the sun, their chitinous hulls pulsing with alien life. Spore pods began raining down like tears from a weeping god. Xerath's hybrid children gathered around him in the cathedral they'd carved from human bone. Their purple flesh trembled with anticipation. For 70 years, they'd dreamed of this moment, the great devouring, when their Tyrannid masters would embrace them as family. The first Tyrannid warriors descended on gossamer wings. They landed among the hybrids with predatory grace. Massive scything talons gleamed in the cathedral's dim light. Bioplasma weapons hummed with lethal energy. Xerath stepped forward, arms spread wide in welcome. "My children," he whispered through the psychic link, "we have prepared this world for you. Every human corrupted, every bloodline tainted. This feast is our gift." The lead Tyrannid warrior tilted its elongated skull. Then it struck. Claws pierced Xerath's chest with surgical precision. Purple blood splattered across ancient stone as the Broodlord's eyes widened in confusion. Around him, his hybrid offspring screamed as Tyrannid bioweapons reduced them to steaming meat. "Why?" Xerath gasped, ichor bubbling from his lips. The answer came not in words, but in cold understanding flooding the psychic network. The Genestealers had served their purpose. They'd softened the world, prepared the biomass, eliminated resistance. Now they were simply more protein to be consumed. The Tyrannids felt no kinship, no gratitude, no mercy. They were hunger given form, and everything, human, Genestealer, hybrid, was merely food. Xerath's consciousness faded as digestive acids began dissolving his flesh from within. Across the Hive City, similar scenes played out in hidden lairs and corrupted districts. Generations of patient infiltrators met the same fate, devoured by the very gods they'd served so faithfully. The greatest tragedy wasn't their death. It was their realization in those final moments that they'd never been anything more than tools. But in the deepest tunnels beneath the city, something stirred. A presence that had been watching, waiting. The Patriarch wasn't finished yet. The Patriarch crouches in absolute darkness, its massive form pressed against cold metal walls. For 300 years, it has not moved from this position. Its forearms hang limp, claws scraping against the floor with each labored breath. The ship's hull groans around it like a dying beast. This is not death. This is something far worse. The creature that once commanded entire worlds through psychic dominion now exists in a prison of its own making. Its brood children are gone. Its cult scattered to ash across a dozen systems. But the Patriarch cannot die. Its alien physiology refuses the mercy of death, regenerating just enough to keep consciousness burning like a flame that will not extinguish. Every cell screams for release that will never come. The worst part? It remembers everything. Every human face twisted in ecstasy as they received its kiss. Every child born bearing its genetic curse. Every moment of perfect unity when thousands of minds bent to its will. Now there is only silence. The Patriarch's psychic tendrils reach out desperately, searching for any mind to touch. But space is vast and empty, and its range has withered to mere meters. Sometimes it hears footsteps in the corridors above. Salvage crews picking through the derelict vessel, unaware of what lurks in the deepest holds. The creature's eyes burn with ancient hunger as it listens to their voices, human voices. So close it can almost taste their thoughts. But the blast doors remain sealed. The locks hold firm. Years blur together in this metal tomb. The Patriarch's mind begins to fracture, splitting between memories of godhood and the crushing reality of abandonment. It starts to whisper to itself in a dozen human languages, fragments of prayers once offered by its devoted cultists. The words echo off the walls like a broken hymn. Sometimes it claws at the walls until its talons break and bleed. The wounds heal within hours, leaving fresh scars over old ones. This is the true curse of the Genestealer bloodline. Not just to infect and consume, but to endure beyond all reason when that purpose is stripped away. The patriarch closes its eyes and tries to remember what silence felt like before consciousness, before hunger, before the endless, gnawing need that defines its existence. But even that mercy is denied. Suddenly, a new sound cuts through the darkness. Metal grinding against metal. The blast doors shudder. After 3 centuries of isolation, something is trying to get in. The patriarch's eyes snap open, burning with renewed hunger. But what they found wasn't what anyone expected. The patriarch's ancient skull throbs with alien agony. For 3 centuries, it has carried the weight of 10,000 minds. Each Genestealer hybrid whispers their hunger into its consciousness. Every cultist's devotion burns like acid through its synapses. The creature that once stalked ship corridors in blessed silence now drowns in endless psychic screaming. Brother Vex feels it first, the crushing pressure behind his third eye. His human memories fragment like glass, the face of his sister, the taste of real food, the warmth of Terra's sun, all dissolving into purple static. The great devourer comes, he whispers, blood trickling from his nose. But the words feel hollow, empty. The hive fleet promised salvation. Instead, it delivered only endless waiting. The patriarch writhes in its throne nest, claws scraping stone. It remembers being singular, focused, a perfect killing machine with one purpose. Now it is legion. Every birth in the cult sends fresh neural pathways burning through its brain. Every death tears chunks from its sanity. The psychic network that should be its strength has become its torture chamber. Magus Keth approaches, her purple robes rustling. She feels the patriarch's pain like ice picks in her skull. The connection that once brought her divine purpose now feels like drowning in an ocean of alien thought. "Father," she gasps. The pain grows stronger. The patriarch's response comes not in words, but in raw emotion. Centuries of isolation, the weight of genetic memory stretching back to the first tyrannid spawning pools. The knowledge that it is both apex predator and eternal slave. Its children were meant to be extensions of its will. Instead, they have become anchors dragging it into madness. The cult spreads through the underhive like a cancer, each new convert adding another voice to the psychic choir. Workers in the manufactorums, nobles in their spires, PDF troopers at their posts, all singing the same song of hunger. But the patriarch hears something else beneath their devotion. Fear, doubt, the growing realization that their promised paradise is a lie. The hive mind doesn't love them, it feeds on them. Vex collapses, convulsing as alien memories flood his consciousness. He sees through compound eyes, tastes atmosphere through chemoreceptors, feels the cold vacuum of space against chitinous hide. For one terrible moment, he understands. They are not the chosen. They are the bait. But the revelation that would shatter their faith never comes. The hive fleet arrives in silence. No screams. No prayers. Just the cold whisper of chitin against metal as 10,000 Genestealers emerge from shadows they've inhabited for generations. The patriarch stands motionless in the cathedral's heart. Its 4 arms spread wide like a grotesque benediction. Around it, the infected kneel, not in worship, but in perfect, terrible unity. They are no longer human. The air tastes of copper and ozone. Each breath burns with spores that remake flesh from the inside out. The temperature drops as massive bioships blot out the sun, casting the world into perpetual twilight. Brother Matthias watches from his hiding place, bolt pistol trembling in his grip. He sees his own reflection in a Genestealer's black eyes and recognizes the hunger there. The same hunger that drove him to hunt them. The same hunger that made him enjoy it. We are the cure. The Patriarch's voice echoes through 1,000 throats. We are the answer to your loneliness. Matthias understands now. The real curse was never the infection. It was the choice. Every human who welcomed the kiss. Every soul who chose belonging over freedom. Every mind that preferred certainty to the terrifying responsibility of individual thought. The Genestealers didn't conquer worlds. They offered salvation to those too broken to refuse it. The bioships descend like falling cathedrals. Their shadows stretch across continents as digestive acids begin their work. Entire cities dissolve into nutrient slurry, feeding the endless appetite of the hive mind. Matthias feels the familiar weight of his weapon. He could fight. He could die screaming defiance at the darkness, or he could kneel. The choice burns in his chest like acid. Around him, the last free humans make their decisions. Some run, some fight, some simply close their eyes and wait. But most choose the kiss. Because in a universe of endless war and suffering, the Genestealers offer something humanity craves more than freedom, purpose, unity, an end to choice itself. The Patriarch's claws gleam in the dying light. Its smile splits reality like a wound, and in that moment, Matthias realizes the most horrifying truth of all. He envies them. The infected don't feel fear anymore. They don't question. They don't doubt. They simply belong to something greater than themselves. In our modern world of isolation and endless choice, perhaps the real question isn't whether we'd resist the Genestealer's curse. Perhaps it's whether we'd want to. When belonging costs everything, but loneliness costs more, what would you choose? Subscribe if you dare to keep questioning. Some truths cut deeper than claws. The stars remember everything. Across 10,000 worlds, the Genestealer curse endures. Not as conqueror, not as victim, as something far worse. In the deepest archives of Terra, Inquisitor Vex discovers the final truth. The parchment crumbles between her trembling fingers. The words burn like acid in her mind. Project Genesis. Imperial Authorization Code, Omega-7. The Imperium didn't just fight Genestealers. They created them, the original bioforms, harvested from ancient Tyranid scouts. Twisted in laboratory hellscapes. Weaponized against rebellious worlds, the perfect infiltrator, the ultimate punishment until they escaped. Vex tastes copper blood. Her own teeth have bitten through her tongue. The irony cuts deeper than any blade. Every Genestealer cult, every infected world, every screaming hive city consumed by alien hunger. All of it traced back to Imperial laboratories. The Imperium's greatest enemy is its own reflection. In the shadows of Necromunda's underhive, a Genestealer patriarch dreams, not of conquest, not of feeding, of home, of a distant star where its kind once lived free. Before the laboratories, before the experiments, before humanity's touch turned paradise into nightmare. The creature's psychic scream echoes across the galaxy. Every Genestealer feels it. Every hybrid hears the call, not for war, for remembrance. They are not invaders. They are refugees from their own genocide. Survivors of Imperial ambition. Living weapons that learn to weep. The curse isn't their hunger. The curse is their memory. Every generation remembers the laboratory tables, the screaming, The moment their DNA became humanity's tool, they pass down trauma like genetic code. Infection becomes inheritance. Pain becomes purpose. In the 41st millennium, Genestealer cults spread across Imperial space. But they're not conquering, they're coming home, to the species that made them monsters. Vex drops the parchment. It disintegrates into ash, like every uncomfortable truth in the Imperium's history. She looks at her reflection in the archive's black glass, sees something moving behind her eyes, something that shouldn't be there. The infection began the moment she read those words. Knowledge is the deadliest virus. Truth is the perfect weapon. And somewhere in the darkness, a Genestealer patriarch smiles with too many teeth. Because the real curse was never the infection. It was always the guilt. In our world, we create our own monsters. We weaponize the innocent. We forget our crimes until they come crawling back. Every click is a choice. Every view, a witness to the darkness we refuse to see. What monsters are we creating today?